Have you ever thought about punishment and equality? Do you think probation is an appropriate punishment for child molesters? How about a life sentence for intentional murderers? I believe we have a duty as Americans to hold people accountable for their actions, and we should really be holding to our just desserts criminal code and policy. Now, Dudley Sharp, he's the director of the Death Penalty Resources, stated the death penalty debate in the U.S. is dominated by fraudulent voices of the anti death penalty movement. The culture of lies and deceit so dominates that movement that many of the falsehoods are now wrongly accepted as fact by both advocates and opponents of capital punishment. The following report presented the true facts of the death penalty in America. If you are even casually aware of this public debate, you will note that every category contradicts the well-worn frauds presented by the anti-death penalty movement. The anti-death penalty movement specializes in the abolition of the truth. Now, Abraham Lincoln, we know him as being one of our very first most prominent presidents, was quoted as saying, "Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves, and under a just God cannot long retain it." George Bush also said, "I don't think you should support the death penalty to seek revenge. I don't think that's right. I think the reason to support the death penalty is because it saves other people's lives. I support the death penalty because I believe it administered swiftly and justly. Capital punishment is a deterrent against future violence and will save other innocent lives." These are our first and relatively recent presidents. Are they wrong in sharing the same opinion with a lapse of hundreds of years between holding office? I think not. Now, we should look at current situations or most relevant situations when considering capital punishment. So let's take a look at the Stanley Tookie Williams death penalty result and the story therein. Now, Stanley Tookie Williams was a man who started and led the most notorious violent gang called the Crips. On December 13, 2005, Williams was executed by lethal injection after clemency and a 4-week stay of execution were both rejected by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Amid the debate over the death penalty, Williams was the second inmate in California to be executed in 2005. Now, in 1979, Williams was convicted of murder in 2 separate incidents. William always maintained his innocence, though subsequent court reviews concluded that he was, beyond a reasonable doubt and with no sufficient evidence supporting other than that, guilty with compelling reason guilty of those crimes, and they would not grant a retrial. Now, during a 7-Eleven robbery, he pointed a shotgun at the manager's back and directed him to a back storage room and ordered him to lie down. The man said that a man that was in cohorts with Williams, also known as his co-defendant, said that the next thing he heard was the sound of a round being chambered into the shotgun, and then he heard a shot and glass breaking, followed by 2 more shots. Records show that he shot at a security monitor and then killed Owens, the owner of the store, the manager therein, shooting him twice in the back at point-blank range as he lay prone on the storage room floor. His second conviction was for 3 murders that occurred at approximately 5 o'clock in the morning on March 11, 1979. So we're talking about not much of a span of difference in time. He entered the Brookhaven Motel lobby and then broke down the door that led to the private office. I would assume that he was probably trying to rob them. Inside the office, he shot and killed 2 women and a young man, all related, after he emptied the cash register and then fled the scene. Now, as an inmate in the California Department of Corrections at San Quentin State Prison, he spent 6.5 years in solitary confinement in the late 1980s for multiple assaults on guards and fellow inmates. This just goes to show that the reality and dangers of his desire to be violent and deadly were still accurate. Even prison couldn't stifle those desires, and instead of killing him immediately and saving the lives of other people and not endangering them, we allowed him to hurt many more people. Let's consider the Unabomber, Timothy McVeigh, and the Aurora cinema shooter. If these killers recanted their behavior and showed remorse, should we disregard the numerous lives they took? I think not. Now, the imposition of the death penalty is extraordinarily rare. Since 1967, there has been one execution for every 1,600 murders, or that's about 0.06%. There have been approximately 560,000 murders and 358 executions from 1967 to 1996. This was received from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report and the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Now, basically, this means we're basing our idea of the death penalty not on being a deterrent, but on unequal statistics. If I have one piece of food on an entire table of different foods and then say it is all salty because I've tasted one, this is neither true nor accurate. We base our statistics about the death penalty not being an effective deterrent on uneven and irrational data. If we killed everyone put on the death penalty consequence, I am assured it would make a severe and immediate impact on the criminal and murderous society. Right now, our rapists and child murderers get a slap on the wrist and get to enjoy a lax life in prison, while they still pose an immediate threat to those around them. How fair is that? There was a case in 2008 called Bays versus Rees. Now, in April 16, 2008, there was the petitioner Ralph Bays and Thomas C. Bowling. They were convicted for murder and sentenced to death in Kentucky State Court. They filed a suit asserting that the lethal injection protocol violates the Eighth Amendment's constitutional ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The state trial court upheld it as constitutional. Later, the Kentucky Supreme Court affirmed, holding that the lethal injection protocol was subsequently safe and wanton and unnecessary infliction of pain, torture, or lingering death. The Supreme Court affirmed that the lethal injection protocol is constitutional. Now, assuming that all murderers would instantly die upon murdering, murderers would then kill only if they wished to die themselves. Murder-suicide is an extremely small component of all murders. Therefore, if their swift and sure death penalty was universal and applied to our most and our worst criminals, it is logically conclusive that the death penalty would be a significant deterrent and that many innocent lives would be saved. In fact, swift and sure executions do result in deterrence. The greater the publicity surrounding executions, the greater the deterrent effect. Now, when we look at cost of life without parole and the cost of the death penalty, there are some wavering situations. Now, about 1 year for life without parole is about $34,200 a year. Now, the cost of the death penalty, because of retrials, appellates, numerous things of that nature, costs about $60,000. So it's almost double. However, at a 2% annual cost increase, plus $75,000 for trial and appeals, the actual 1 year for life without a parole becomes almost $110,000. Versus the cost of the death penalty only increases another 2%, and it almost equals out. Now, when we look at Christianity and the death penalty, there's, those opposing factors. It is because humans are created in the image of God that capital punishment for premeditated murder was a perpetual obligation. The full range of biblical data weighs in its favor. This is the one crime in the Bible for which no restitution was possible. That is from Numbers, chapter 35, verse 31 through 33. Now, the time of Noah, there was a covenant recorded in Genesis 9, which says, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed." That's Genesis chapter 9, verse 6. Now, Paul, well known in the Bible as being a follower of Jesus, in his hearing before Festus, states, "If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die." That is Acts chapter 25, verse 11. Very clearly, this constitutes an acknowledgement on part, biblically based, that with regard to Christianity and beliefs that even the Bible supported the power of life and death in the administration of justice, just as it did in the days of Noah. Now, it is not so much a question as to whether we should not kill these killers, but a question of how soon they should die. The law is the law. If we do not follow the law, we should suffer the consequences. If you know your action will result in your own death, yet still commit the crime, then you essentially choose death. An eye for an eye is our nation's policy regarding our just desserts doctrine. Are we holding to this idea effectively? I leave you with one question. Stand up if Tookie Williams was senselessly murdered, or stay seated if you think Tookie Williams, who senselessly murdered your family, you would want him to live well off in prison. If you are not standing, then I am assured that you understand the seriousness of this issue, and I believe you will vote in favor of the death penalty in the future. Thank you for your time.